In the current Galaxy's Edge comic series, we've had the opportunity to see the existing Star Wars canon expand through some fairly interesting lore, including a story showing the fate of Jedi Master Ki-Adi-Mundi's lightsaber after Order 66, and what was inside the Temple of the Kyber on Jedha, with some interesting connections to the ancient Jedi. But in my opinion, yesterday's issue number 4 of the Galaxy's Edge comic has been by far the most interesting, as it included a number of great connections with the Sith lore that previously existed in Legends, even bringing a few important elements back into the canon, such as ancient Sith swords and warblades, Sith Hounds, and as I'm going to argue, the Sith species itself. As a brief recap, for those who haven't yet read the first 3 issues of the series, the main plot involves a group of 3 outlaws attempting to steal a powerful ancient Sith relic from a collector named Dok-Ondar, who had some of the most valuable artifacts in the galaxy. The target of the outlaws has been revealed to be an ancient Sith sword known as the Sword of Kashun. The trio has already obtained the sword's blade and only need the hilt from Dok-Ondar. With the piece fully intact, the outlaws would be paid the full amount from their buyer, but in joining the 2 halves together, they also risk unleashing a power that would be terrifying in the wrong hands. In Legends, Sith swords and warblades were a prominent feature of the ancient Sith when the first Jedi exiles arrived on Korriban after the 100-Year Darkness in 6900 BBY to the Great Hyperspace War in 5000 BBY. Altered through Sith alchemy, and many times imbued with the dark side, these swords were strong enough to block lightsaber strikes, and were wielded by some of the most powerful ancient Sith, including Ajunta Pall, Ludo Kresh, Marka Ragnos, and Naga Sadow. During the Golden Age of the Sith, in the days of the old Sith Empire, Sith swords were synonymous with the ancient Sith who wielded them. The great legacy of these Sith swords in Legends has now appeared to be adopted in canon, as we now have our first sword connected to the ancient Sith and to the planet of Korriban, known as Moraban in canon. What we know about this Sword of Kashun is provided to us in issue number 4 by none other than Dr. Aphra, who was actually the person to obtain it from the temples of Moraban and bring it into the known galaxy and possession of Dok-Ondar. From Aphra, it's believed the sword was forged by a sect of Dawutan Sith warriors who had a philosophy behind their use of swords. Lightsabers were used by the weak, and it took a particularly powerful warrior to wield one. According to Aphra, it was also believed that blades like the Sword of Kashun was cursed, making it a catalyst for the Sith betraying each other. I think this is a great inclusion, as it not only stays true to the legendary warrior traditions of those ancient Sith who wielded them in Legends, but it also adopts the Legends interpretation that Sith swords weren't merely a melee weapon that preceded lightsabers, eventually replaced when better technology arrived. In Legends, Sith swords were preferred over lightsabers, distinguishing them as a powerful weapon in their own right. Within the guide, Jedi vs. Sith, the Essential Guide to the Force, it's noted that lightsaber technology existed so that at the time of the war between the Jedi and Dark Jedi in the 100-Year Darkness, an early version of the lightsaber called the Proto-Saber was used, which connected the weapon to a belt-mounted power pack through a cord. In fact, pictures showing the exiles who were defeated in the 100-Year Darkness depict them arriving on Korriban in 6900 BBY with this lightsaber technology. However, when the Great Hyperspace War erupted between the Sith on Korriban and the Jedi roughly 2,000 years later, the Sith wielded swords and not lightsabers, demonstrating an unwillingness to adopt lightsabers over the warrior traditions displayed through their warblades. We now have the same idea in canon. Sith swords weren't merely a weapon adopted before lightsabers. Lightsaber technology existed but was rejected in favor of the sword, distinguishing them as important weapons to the ancient Sith. Even better, we see that Aphra obtained the Sword of Kashun on the homeworld of the ancient Sith, the planet Moraban, analogous to Korriban in Legends. Given that the temple is visually very different from the one Yoda went into in the Clone Wars TV series, with 2 massive sword-wielding statues in front of the temple, we can't say with 100% certainty that Aphra is in the Valley of the Dark Lords like Yoda was. However, the valley has always been a series of multiple temples and tombs, so I have no problem with seeing the Sword of Kashun originating within the Valley of the Dark Lords as well. As seen in Galaxy's Edge issue number 4, Aphra fights her way through the temple to locate the sword in front of what appears to be an open tomb of a mummified ancient Sith, eventually taking it for herself and ultimately coming into possession of Dok-Ondar. All of these connections the Sword of Kashun has with legends are great, from the ancient Sith elements, the planet of Moraban, and the warrior traditions of the sword in an age that could have easily seen lightsabers used instead. I was definitely hoping for a name connected to the sword, or at least a timeline for its creation, which is disappointing not to see at least up until issue number 4, but it's great to see a lot of elements from the golden age of the Sith and legends make their way into canon through the relic. But it wasn't merely the ancient Sith swords that have elements now reintroduced in canon, but also the creature known as the Sith Hound. These Sith Hounds were recently reintroduced to canon through the novel Dooku Jedi Lost, but in name only. Yesterday's comic issue has reintroduced the Sith Hound back into canon in an even bigger way, with their appearance and role mirroring elements that previously existed in Legends. In Legends, Sith Hounds were fearless, ferocious beasts that acted as guardians of the Sith tombs on Korriban. And that's exactly what their role was here in Galaxy's Edge issue number 4, attacking Aphra and her team as they infiltrated the Sith Temple. This is another great addition to the issue, and given the shared appearance and role the Sith Hound had, it's an excellent nod to the creature as it existed in Legends. The last edition might be a bit on the speculative side, but I believe there are enough clues included in the issue to allow us to say the Sith species has also made its way back into the current canon as well, joining the ancient Sith swords and the Sith Hound. Unfortunately, there isn't a specific reference to the species or a clear image of a Sith pureblood, but we should keep in mind that the evidence is on the planet of Moraban, which being the canon's version of Korriban from Legends, would be the homeworld of the Sith species. One of the biggest clues is the existence of an important physical feature that define the Sith, which is the two tendrils that hung down from both sides of their face. These are seen on both statues at the front of the temple entered by Aphra, and also on the body within the tomb overseeing the Sword of Kashun. Given that these tendrils are wrapped like the rest of the body, it's clearly a physical feature, and not likely an ornament added by the being. But it's not just the tendrils or the connection to Moraban. The robes also appear to have a connection to the Sith purebloods of Legends, specifically the Kasai Sith of Korriban. Although these robes are significantly tattered by the time Aphra comes across it, it's clear that the individual within the tomb wore a hooded robe just as the priests of the Kasai did, with a similar center portion that flowed down the middle of the robe. These pieces of evidence certainly aren't as concrete as the ancient Sith swords or Sith Hounds, but I believe all of them add up to allow us to say with some confidence that this is a Sith pureblood overseeing the swords sought by Aphra. Perhaps I'm relying too much on Legends material here, but it just makes sense that a member of the Sith species would be in a temple on Moraban. At the very least, it would be great if all of these clues added up to a story that expanded on the Sith and their origins on Moraban within canon. So there we have it, some interesting additions to the current canon and their connections to Legends. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions. Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. Or perhaps follow us on Twitter at SW Reading Club for updates regarding the channel. Or support the channel through Patreon for access to exclusive rewards and discussions. If not for me... for hoping it's not another XR Kun fake out.